Welcome back to the Lynx Golf Podcast. I'm Al Lunsford, digital editor for Lynx, joined by my co-host Joe Passoff. And joining us today from the Kawonu team are the golf course architect Andrew Green and Scott Ferrell. Guys, we're excited to hear all about Kawonu today. And Andrew, your efforts there from the ground up, and Scott, hear a lot of background from you as well about the club. Golf only. We're going to get into that and why that works for Kawonu, what the name means. Maybe we can start there even. But thank you guys for joining us today. Exciting stuff. Kawonu looking at a 2027 opening in Greenville, South Carolina, close to where I got married. So that will be a special tie for me personally. But looking forward to seeing it. Hey, let's go for Scott. Let's explain the name of Kawonu, what it means, and give us a little bit of background on the club.
Okay, well, Greenville's in the upstate of South Carolina, as you likely know, and generations ago, the Cherokee Indian occupied the upstate. And then over time, this property that we have was a hunting property. Many generations of families hunted this property. And there's a lot of duck hunting on the property, and Kawonu is the Cherokee word for duck. So we drew a little bit from the history of the land and the Cherokee heritage.
And that's a duck feather on the logo, I presume there.
That's correct.
There you go. What are the other things, if someone has never heard of this project, what do they need to know about what Kawonu is?
Well, it's an Andrew Green design. I usually lead with that because it's significant that we have Andrew on board. It's a golf only club, as I think you mentioned, in the upstate of South Carolina. We've got a hybrid private membership. We're going to have a significant local presence, but also national memberships. We're going to have lodging on site. Which allows us to reach out around the country and bring some golf like-minded folks into the fold.
And we'll get into more about the golf only, why there's really golf and not really anything else beyond a what sounds like a fantastic clubhouse. And you mentioned some on-site lodging, but Andrew, thanks again for joining us too. Why did you feel like this was the right project for you to get in the dirt in South Carolina?
Yeah, thanks, Al. Yeah, thanks for having us. It's the ground there it's a magical place for the game of golf. And when I met with Scott and some of the other founding partners for the project, I got this sense that there's this deep love for the game and appreciation for all the things that it brings to the players, and that there was this kind of cornerstone of the game that was missing in Greenville that seemed like we could work together to find that. And, I've said a couple times probably that, this is a very unique set of circumstances, the golf only aspect, the idea that we have an amazing piece of ground where the only consideration was the best golf. There's nothing else that mattered. And to have those sets of circumstances in a place in the landscape that is so cool. Greenville is in a great part of the United States, not only from the energy of the town and all the great things happening there, but from a pure topographic standpoint in the game of golf, there's this great blend of graceful contours and dramatic elevation drops and changes that we could take advantage of. And when you added all that up, it was hard for me to resist.
Joe, feel free to chime in whenever you'd like here.
All right, I'm going to start chiming right now, Al. I'm based in Arizona, in Scottsdale. I'm a little jealous because we don't have much new that's going on out here, land and water issues. And I'm jealous of South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Texas, where so much is going on. So my first question is for Scott. Scott, did you conceive of this club, you and your founding partners and so forth, as something we just want to do a club with our concept somewhere in the Southeast? Or did you target Greenville and or South Carolina in particular and say, now let's go find the best piece of ground to suit the purpose of this club?
Well, I live in Greenville, so we were very much focused on Greenville because that's where our partners are, and it's a wonderful place to live, as Andrew mentioned. I wish it was a glamorous story, but it's really not. I had a friend and neighbor who had a piece of property that we were looking at, and we started talking about doing a golf course. It was really out of the blue, quite honestly. I did not have a plan to do this. But when his property became available, the seed was planted. We worked on that property for about 8 months. It didn't work out, and I thought the project was going to die right there. But ironically, I got a phone call the very week that we decided not to do that property from another landowner, and so we took a look at this new piece of property, and frankly, it was 10 times better than the first piece of property. So, and Andrew came, Andrew vetted the first property. But then I asked him to come and look at the second piece of property, and it didn't take him long to say, you need to buy this property. So that was a blessing and an endorsement that meant a lot to us. So we started to get to work in earnest on this second piece of property, and that's where we ended up about a year ago.
And Al, I'll ask one more, and then I'll throw it back to you. But
Sure.
Andrew, okay, we remember old Tom Morris started this thing that said, "Oh, the good Lord intended this land for a golf course." What was it? You alluded to it generally, but more specifically, what did you find in this piece of property that you said, Scott, you got to buy this property?
Yeah. I guess there's been this real trend, and rightfully so, to find sand, right? Build great golf on sand, and golf and sand do go really well together. But I contend that if you can find a great piece of ground that moves and twists and turns in really dramatic ways, you don't have to worry about moving a bunch of sand to get great golf. You have to worry about unlocking the piece of ground to get those amazing shots. And so when we started to look at this piece of ground, the contours move in many different directions. It's not just a piece of property that falls from the high side to the low side. There's a lot of up and downs and lefts and rights and dimensions that work beautifully for the game, meaning that tee shots that are 300 yards plus or minus land perfectly on a piece of ground, and there's great spots to get forward tees that take advantage of a similar landing zone, and then green sites that are just limitless that create a lot of drama and excitement. And so when you start to put all those pieces together, that's where it really starts to show itself as ideal for this venture.
Al, I lied. I want to ask one more question.
Fire away.
And it's yours. So, Andrew, when you did see this piece of property and, a big smile and the light bulb, did it remind you of any other piece of property, either existing or not, that you had seen elsewhere?
Yeah, it's solely unique for sure, but the journey through the ground, I hate to use this because it's so cliche, but it does have some of the dramatic drops and changes, ups and downs of a place like Augusta. And it's not because that's our path and that's what we're modeling ourselves after. It's just that when you look at the topography of Greenville and you think down to that Augusta kind of area where you get this kind of transition from foothills to flat, that's where you get these really interesting landforms that tend to be great for golf. And there's nothing like going to a mountainous course and playing over this amazing dramatic topography, but it's not much fun to walk and traverse and play time and time again. Kawonu has this really nice mixture of that dramatic ground, but the holes connect really well, and it makes for a very enjoyable walk and a great way just to enjoy the entire piece of ground.
I know you list on the site, you work in multiple and strategic water features into design. Were those existing there when you came on site and you just kind of worked around them?
Yeah, as Scott had said earlier, the property had been utilized for outdoor enjoyment and hunting and things for decades. And so the previous landowners had done a great job of really maintaining and implementing natural assets onto the property that were great for wildlife and very natural in their setting. So there were a number of water bodies, a number of ponds on the golf course or on the property that we were able to take advantage of. And it's not so much that they are, something you might see where, there's tons of forced carries and those kinds of things, but they really flank the lines of play, develop a lot of strategic elements, things you have to think about, but don't make the game cumbersome, um, which is another thing that we love about it. And then another really cool thing is it sits up above a floodplain on the Reedy River, and we are able to utilize the changes in grade that go along with that without putting the golf holes actually in the floodplain, which, as we all know, golf tends to find ground that's not good for anything else and tends to sometimes find their way into floodplains. This is a complete opposite set of circumstances where we're actually able to utilize that change in topography and the dramatic nature of it, but we don't have to put golf down there. So we're really excited that the golf course is a lot less inhibited by Mother Nature because of it.
Sure. I was kind of studying the course map and the renderings from what I could gather, and it looks like the last three holes, a 5-3-4 finish, sort of on top of that floodplain, and giving you the opportunity at 16 to play across it if you dare. 17 sort of a hero shot over that, and then long par four finish. That has to be a highlight of the round there at the very end. But what other highlights would you anticipate people are going to talk about when they play it?
Yeah. Well, I certainly love the idea that there are a handful of golf holes throughout that people tend to think are their favorites. I'm not a big, let me back up. I'm not a signature hole kind of guy. Like that's not a thing. I want 18 of the best holes I can come up with, and whatever people like the most sounds good to me. But when we maneuvered through the property and we got to the ground that we set aside for 16 and 17, especially, certainly that cliff's edge that we have on the property, it felt like it had absolutely had to be utilized, and to create shots that you can be bold, when it comes to using that ground, seemed like it had to happen. But one of the things I really enjoy about it is the looping of the two nines. You get to experience a little bit of that upland feel, a little bit of the lower portions of the property, and you journey through the ground, and the holes twist and turn in a way that you kind of get a little lost, which I love about the game. You don't feel like you're playing soldier golf back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, which is great. And then I also think that you get a hint of all the things that the game of golf offers and that this property has going for it in those two loops. Really excited about the mixture of long and short holes. We've got some really good half par holes that architects are always talking about. Those are some of the best holes in golf. So excited about it throughout. I don't know if there's exactly one hole that stands above the rest.
Sure. You mentioned loops. Loops is one thing I'm also interested in because you've sort of built in shorter loops and mentioned on the site that you could be used for alternate formats or special events and things of that nature for members. Maybe Scott, can you describe what you envision the shorter loops of the course to be for people and how that just adds to the whole experience?
Well, I could start that by going back to a conversation Andrew and I had about a short course. Most new projects seem to want to have a maybe a par three 9-hole short course. And it was interesting. He cautioned us about that. He goes, if you don't get that just right, and it's not in the right place, and the people that that are on property don't use it, then you have spent money to build it, number one, and then you have to spend money to maintain it. And that made a lot of sense to us that we didn't want to make that mistake. So that led Andrew to incorporating these short loops within the existing golf course. And our largest lake is pretty central feature, particularly on the front nine. And Andrew cleverly created two short loops, one 6 holes and one 4 hole, where you're teeing off from maybe number 1 tee and you're hitting to 3 green and so on and so forth. So we don't have to do anything. That's already there, but he's set up those loops. And I anticipate if you have a member guest shootout or a member shootout, that would be ideal. I think people staying on site might grab a beer in the evening and take 3 or 4 clubs and walk around those loops in that lake. We're also that lake's also going to house a little fishing cabin, so there'll be some fishing on site as well. So I just thought that was a very that was genius in my view in terms of doing something that lowered the risk of making a mistake and also created something very, very cool that people are excited about.
Yeah, it's fascinating because, that's the first thing anyone asks about any golf property nowadays. It's, are you going to add more? Are you going to add a short course? Things like that. You've already kind of built that into it without actually having to dig more in the ground. So that's a very interesting way to approach the whole thing. So yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Al. Yeah, just to add on to it, one of the interesting things about that concept is we're able to play some alternate angles into those putting surfaces that you may have played earlier in the day. And the angles work for those alternate lines of play, but it's a completely different ask, whether it be the length of the golf shot or that direction into that whole location. And also the idea was to kind of center that on the front nine, where typically you wouldn't have a lot of regular play, moving through the space, especially later in the day, that you could utilize those holes. And we really just try to think about what's the operational benefits of thinking outside of the box in something like this versus having a standalone short facility.
There's a lot of talk about camaraderie in a golf only club. I'm not going to commit to this, but I could even envision people playing those holes while other people are playing the big course. And you arrive at a green at the same time and talk about camaraderie. That could be maybe an operational nightmare. I don't know, but it could also be a lot of fun at the same time.
Well, you pinned a fascinating piece that's on the Kawonu Golf Club site, Scott did, about the rise of golf-only clubs. Can you talk a little bit about why this is the vision for Kawonu?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. There's nothing like this in the upstate. Most of what you have here are country clubs, the traditional tennis, swimming, golf, social. That's most of what exists here in the upstate. So we felt like having a unique concept in this market was a good idea. And I think the response of the market has proven that to be true. There's just a tremendous amount of interest in that golf only concept. And I think it largely revolves around the passion for golf. You're boiling this down to the essence of the game. You're not distracted by other amenities as a club. It's like going to Pinehurst. Almost everybody in Pinehurst is a golfer, which is what I love about Pinehurst is if you go to a restaurant or a bar or wherever, you're running into other golfers. So I think the golf only camaraderie and passion for the game is a motivating factor for us. And I think Andrew would agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, a couple years ago, the PGA Championship was being played at Oak Hill up near Rochester, New York. And I know Joe pinned a piece about Andrew back when that event was about to happen. So I'm sure he might have something reminiscing on that great piece he wrote about how all of that influences what Andrew is doing today. So, Joe.
Well, yes. I mean, from the design standpoint, and if you're tuning in for a Links Magazine podcast, you definitely are interested in golf course design. So I think that's the, $64, $6,400, $64 million question that Al phrased very well on that list, Andrew, about the transition, about going from pure restoration work / renovation into original golf course designs. And I want to hear it. I know everybody does. Before we jump into that, Scott, can you explain why? I mean, there are a lot of talented architects out there, and Andrew has won his share of awards over the last few years for work around the country. Why did you choose Andrew to be the architect partner in bringing this vision to life?
Well, I think that's a neat story too, because I came out of that world. I ran Gary Player Design for 15 years, and we did projects all over the world. And I'm going to have to admit, somebody mentioned Andrew's name to me, and granted, it's been a few years since I was in that space, but I had never heard of Andrew. So I was like, wow, that's interesting. There's somebody out there that I haven't heard of when I'm really close to that world. But I listened to I listened to a podcast he was at Congressional Country Club, I guess, around, was it the Ladies Open or something, Andrew? You had done a podcast
PGA.
there. So I listened to him and I thought, wow, he's very articulate and intelligent, and I like his style. So we got him on the phone and we spent some time, talking about Kawonu and our vision and our plans. And, I don't want to stereotype designers, but there's a lot of ego in that world. And I did not detect any ego from Andrew. I felt like there was nothing but humility there. So his style just won me over. I mean, and I knew from after I researched him and understood the renovations that he had done, I knew he was capable of doing the golf course. So it really boiled down to picking someone that we could enjoy working with and fit into the team nicely. And that's really what drove our decision.
Well, the first time I actually talked to Andrew for a Link story was for one called the Go-To Restorers, kind of who are the top folks in the game in that department. And Andrew was well on his way and already at that elite level. But I did pose the question at the time we talked, which is, would you like to design some original golf courses? And as our entire conversation went, Andrew was thoughtful, reasoned, measured, and said, yes, if the project is right and things come together, I would love to do that. And, you just don't know if and when and so forth. And if you're so completely pigeonholed on that restoration aspect, and will you ever be given the chance and that kind of thing. But I'll also say that during the two conversations we had in also talking about then Oak Hill was, Scott, I shared your feeling from my conversations with Andrew that this was a guy who was now very successful, but he was a true student of architecture. Andrew, we got into this little this little riff about you going back to USGA archives maybe and looking up things William Flynn had written. And it was like you were like a kid in a candy store, like, oh my gosh, this guy was so far ahead of his time. And I shared that, kind of enthusiasm, when you find things like this and you learn and you continue to learn and you never stop learning. So long preamble to say you finally have stepped into the ring to be able to do original designs. And so how did that come about for you? going from, pretty much elite level, one of the 2 or 3 go-tos in the business, to saying, yeah, I'm ready to step in here and do something. And how did that all come about?
Sure. Yeah, over the years, I was probably a little scarred because, first, there wasn't a lot of new construction work for a good
Yeah.
period of my early career. And then when, someone would call, you'd get excited and go rush off and do a bunch of work trying to see if you could secure the job. And you'd find at the end of the day, either, the timing wasn't right, the property wasn't right, the commitment level of the folks involved wasn't right, something would cause a major hiccup. And then you'd have invested all this emotional energy into one of these creations that are very personal for an architect. This is not just something that you just wake up and slap on a piece of paper. And so I'd been very guarded. And in fact, over the last couple of years, been numerous people had reached out that I just didn't feel highly confident in. And I just said, no, thank you. And heck, a few of them are in the ground with some other architects today that, maybe I messed up. But when Scott and his team reached out, there was a level of confidence and commitment from them, and the realization that they knew how to do this. They knew what it took. They were committed to creating this amazing product. I love the idea of this golf only aspect, but then this thing that's very important to Greenville, but also reaches far beyond into the game of golf across the United States. All of that, just on its face, was awesome. Looking at the property certainly elevated things to a higher level. And then I really have this, I don't know, maybe it's just so I sleep better at night, but I feel like each project as they've come along have built upon the last one. And, I've spent 23 years, 24 years, honing my craft, learning from the greats of the game, all these golden age guys that I so admire, just been soaking in all of these data points. And now to have the ability to go put my own stuff on the ground, I just feel like there's this explosion of creativity that's happening. And also an idea that, listen, it has to be measured. It can't be insanity. It can't be Spinal Tap. This one goes to 11. It's got to be, um,
Uh,
in a good frame of mind. And so, I can't thank Scott and the team at Kawanu enough for the opportunity, but I'm really excited to show the world what we can do and create this lasting place where people are going to come play the game and never forget it.
well, alluding as you did to having so much study of the masters of the golden age, you've had to learn everything about them, and even get into their minds about what they were thinking when they did this. How do you put it back? So, you've worked on a lot of Donald Ross courses. Um, then, a little bit of a hodgepodge, say a congressional, where I know that, it was considered a renovation, but, privately, you guys kind of called it the new blue. So, with those great names that you've worked on their golf courses, did one have more influence than the other on Andrew Green doing an original golf course?
Yeah, I, I recall vividly working on the routing plan, and the holes seemed to unfold almost automatically. It was the journey from one spot in the topography to another seemed to just fit very naturally. So that part, it just felt, it was kind of meant to be kind of part. The golf features, the dynamics of the putting surfaces, the way the bunkers will present themselves, the simplicity of the grading. A lot of that is probably some mixture of all of those golden age guys. The greens will feel very much pushed up or manufactured just from the immediate ground around each area. The goal was to move as little dirt as possible. I think aside from some of the work we're going to be doing with the lakes, I mean, we're trying to move well less than 50,000 yards of dirt, and hopefully closer to 35, where we're really moving minimal amounts of earth. And the goal being to kind of take each green site and just create it the way the old guys would. And I really feel like the combination of this amazing piece of ground, its golf only purpose, the way we've routed the golf course to take advantage of the ground without moving a bunch of dirt, and the way we're going to set tees, bunkers, greens, and other hazards and things we got to think about on the ground in such a simple fashion is almost exactly the way they would have done it in the golden age. And so I can't think of a better training for that set of circumstances than what we've been doing the last 20 plus years. And so I
And
really think people, yeah, go ahead, Scott, please.
Andrew, I just want to offer a quote that my favorite quote associated with this project seems to fit in this part of the discussion. Andrew said, in Greenville, we're creating something new that's going to feel really old. And I just thought, I'm going to put that in the clubhouse somewhere. I just thought that was a wonderful quote, and it kind of touches on what you guys are talking about right now.
Yeah, and I think about it as, a lot of new golf is being created as maybe a playground or part of a resort, or, this destination kind of golf. Or now there's more that are being associated with developments and things. But for this idea of a true foundational club that does have a national reach, but a foundational club on a piece of ground like this, you really have to go a long ways back, I think, to find something like this.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
One of my questions, and this, I think we're going towards the end here, but for both of you guys, if you're able to find an answer to this, Scott, you've had a long career in the golf industry. Maybe I'll start with you. Is there a course or property, similarly to Joe's question about architects, but is there somewhere that has influenced you more than others, or maybe specifically towards this project, is there somewhere where you're thinking like, this is a very similar deal to X, or is it just entirely unique?
I don't know that I really couldn't identify one property. I spent some time in the Northeast, and I grew to love the old school golf courses around Philadelphia, for example. Hadn't spent much time in Long Island, but when I think of the Northeastern Private Club, pure golf, that motivates me, and I think if we can get that kind of a feel at Kawonu, then I'd be very happy and satisfied. I don't think I can pick one property, but I can say that Northeastern traditional golf club is attractive to me for sure.
Mm-hmm. And Andrew, I know you grew up near a place like the Cascades, and we talked about William Flynn earlier. Is that sort of on your pantheon of golf courses that have influenced you from the get-go? And are there others that have made a big impression on you, and as just a person who loves golf, but your career as well?
Yeah, for sure. The Cascades was this place we always wanted to go play and be a part of, and the idea again to unlock a piece of ground, and in that case a piece of ground that is pretty complicated, to be able to create something so magical at the time in which it was done. Yeah, and Scott, he knows I have a deep passion for golf in Philadelphia as well, and I think a lot of the attributes of the property at Kawonu actually share some of that too. It's these amazing places where you have golf holes no one else has, because the ground is so unique and the architects really left it to be played over. Those are the things that certainly influenced me along the way, and showed me the special thing about golf is every golf course is solely unique, and in my mind they should be even more unique, in every way that they can be. They shouldn't be sterilized or mass produced. And so anything we can do to embrace that, I'm all in.
Joe, anything further from you?
I got one last question. You kind of touched on it near the end of your bullet points, Al, and it involves what you asked here was the balance between preserving natural landscapes and creating playable golf courses. And that's part of his question. But for Scott and Andrew, when you do a golf only club, I think there's an implication. We're talking serious golfers that want a golf only environment. And in many cases, those are better players. So how do you craft a golf course to attract and appeal to the better players in the region or slightly beyond? Also get your share of maybe the rankings love, but then folks are going to grow older with this club too, and there needs to be a fair bit of playability in what goes on. Do that balancing act, not just as Al said, preserving the natural landscapes, and not moving too much around, but also that playability factor, which says, good players want that test every single time, every single day, and not every golfer wants, too much test on a daily basis.
Well, I think Andrew's going to be much better suited to answer that question. But I will say that we don't want to. We really don't want to have the hardest golf course in America. We want people to have a good time and have fun. But you're right. The people that we have attracted, we've had 8 PGA Tour members join the club, for example. And then in others are very low single-digit handicaps. So we are attracting some pretty good players. But in terms of how you accomplish what you asked, I'll turn it over to Andrew.
Yeah, Joe, that's at the heart of great golden age design. I mean, all the old guys talked about, this blend of making it a tough test, but also an enjoyable round. And at the heart of it at Kawonu is a ton of fairway turf. I mean, almost every almost every tee spills directly into the fairway. So if you're having a bad day and miss one a little bit, you can immediately get into some playable ground. And then this golf course is going to take advantage of the ground game again in a very similar fashion to some of those old classics. You're going to be able to move your ball along the ground, scoot it into these putting surfaces. And at the same time, we're going to have some hole locations that are diabolic and make you question, should I really aim at that or not? And that really starts to really set up that balance. And I think it's going to be a magical place for all levels of play. And the reality is we've got tees over 7,300 yards all the way down to about 5,000. So we're going to be able to handle whoever wants to come out and enjoy the game. They'll be able to do it at Kawonu.
Sounds ideal. I mean, it's not the easiest thing to accomplish, obviously, but it sounds everything you described, you're absolutely on the right track.
Thanks. Yeah.
And there are founder, resident, regional, and national memberships available. So a lot of spread. You don't have to just live in Greenville to be a part of Kawonu. Excuse me. I knew I would mess that up at some point during our conversation. But it's Kawonu Golf Club. You can visit their website, kawanugolfclub.com. Scott, Andrew, thanks for joining us. Congratulations on this being a reality, and we're really looking forward to seeing it come to fruition here within a couple of years. So best of luck with everything moving forward.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Al. Thanks, Joe.
Cheers.
You bet. Thanks.
Take care.
Appreciate
Bye-bye.
it, guys.